Hi guys, today we're going to have a look at some of the best external mod circuits to drive in Assetto Corsa. This game is full of some fantastic mods and I thought it would be nice to go through some of those, starting with tracks. So let's take a quick look at the best it has to offer. This will be a two-part video, so don't be disappointed if your favourite track currently isn't featured. The first circuit we're looking at is the Feldbergring 1.4 by Fat-Alfie. So this modded track has a 1950s aesthetic to it, so it's probably better suited to vintage cars than these GT2s. But these are the cars that I currently am running around the circuits with, so wanted to make sure that I didn't pick a car that I'm going to instantly crash on. This track, as you can see, has some amazing detail to it. You've got these cobblestone roads that you can feel on the force feedback. You've got amazing trackside objects like the whole of this little village that we drive through. And then we've got this rolling landscape as we come out of the village. We've got lots of trackside cameras and parked vehicles. All of those vehicles fit in with the 1950s aesthetic, and yeah, it's really well thought out. The circuit itself is a pleasure to drive. It's quite long, around 11 kilometers, so it takes a little bit of practice to get around here cleanly, but it gives you this nice feeling when you're driving around this beautiful countryside. Makes you want to visit more of rural Germany. You might be able to see as we're driving through here, this is driving with AI, so it is a track that's safe to drive with AI. And most of the trackside objects, like the lampposts, will not crash you out. So you have at least some protection from what would have been exposed to a 1950s driver. The attention to detail in the scenery is superb. Not only do you have these rolling mountains and the odd house here and there, with crowds, you have these little shacks for the media, the camera crews. You have air balloons in the distance, and it feels very much like a live racetrack, which, if you're driving a vintage car around here, will give you this nice feeling of immersion. Next up we have another circuit by Fat-Alfie, and this is Fonteny, a fictional circuit that is essentially trying to be the French green hell. This is another circuit that again is fully supported for AI and hot lapping. It has 40 grid spaces and is optimized for performance. There are two layouts to this and reverse layout. As I said, this is supposed to be replicating the green hell, so it's quite a long circuit at 26 kilometers. It has a very different feel to the previous circuit that we looked at, but is similarly themed around the 1950s. Like its older sibling, it is chock full of amazing detail. It really does feel very lifelike as you drive through the French countryside. It's quite a tricky circuit to learn because of the length of it, but it does have a lot of character and it makes you want to drive through it. The soft verges are quite nice, so if you do make the odd mistake you can still continue driving, but any serious mistakes will be punished pretty severely. Overall, I don't think this is as good as Feldbergring, but it's still a damn good circuit. And if you are driving or intending to create a 1950s championship with some classic cars, or just want to drive around with classic cars, then this is another fine example of a track that you would definitely feel at home at in a, say, 1960s F1 car. Our next track in our must-drive list is Bridgehampton 2.0. This track models a race circuit that was built in the 1950s in the heart of the Hamptons on Long Island, New York. The actual implementation here is from the late 80s, early 90s, and if you have a look at some of the scenery here, that is evident in the vehicles that are around. They're a lot later era than the previous tracks we've looked at. The circuit itself is purpose-built and is more than a little rough around the edges. We've got lots of dusty runoffs, which are a pain if you get your wheels on there. And you have these little half-tire loops in the ground on the inside of corners. It's a nice little twisty track that provides some interesting racing. And whilst the scenery is sparse due to the nature of the circuit being quite sandy and having a few trees and hills here and there, it still feels pretty nice to run through. You have a lot of undulation, which adds to the dynamic here, and being relatively narrow, it makes for some close quarters racing. This is the first track on our list that isn't developed by Fat-Alfie. This is LilSki, and unlike those other circuits, this one being a little bit later on, the classic vehicles don't feel out of place, but neither did the modern cars. It feels a little bit more balanced for a variety of vehicles, whereas the classic features of the previous two tracks we looked at kind of make it more suitable for 50s and 60s vehicles, maybe 70s, but it feels a little wrong to be driving a modern car around there. The wide dusty runoffs mean that you can take some liberties with some of the corners to get past your competitors, whilst keeping some of your tyre contact on track. If you do run off on the outside of the gravel though, that can just drag you out and it's quite difficult to get back in. But I like that dynamic. It feels a little bit like when you get on the rough stuff in Laguna Seca. The surface is quite bumpy. I feel that adds to the theatre of the whole experience. Would be nice if the circuit itself felt a little more alive, but it's really well modelled. If the previous Fat-Alfie tracks are a necessity for classic racing, then Donington Park 2.02 is a must-have for modern day racers. This track is a modern classic. It is a circuit that's been around for a while, and it is great for tin top racing, with the structure of the circuit really working quite well for GTs and touring cars alike. This version by Brun is pretty fantastic. It has a good level of detail of the circuit, as well as giving you the features that you need in order to be able to be fast around Donington. It offers you both the national and the international circuits. We're driving on the international one here, which is the longer circuit. And it really feels like a very good version. I'd say it's definitely up there with the recent Assetto Corsa Competizione version. Not quite to that level, but it's not far off either. Donington Park is one of my all-time favourite circuits, so I'm a little biased here, but I really feel that you need to have this circuit on your machine so you can do some racing around it. We started with a Fat-Alfie circuit and we're going to end with a Fat-Alfie circuit. Another circuit that is tuned for a classic theatre. So you have lots of retro signage and scenery that surrounds the circuit. Some quaint little buildings and villages, and some pretty dangerously fast corners. Actually, the banked corner around here is pretty epic to drive around. You have that banked corner and then suddenly you've got the tight and twisty stuff, so that's all really quite fun to drive around. This circuit is a little older than the others that we've featured here, with it being designed in the 30s, but it still doesn't feel out of place with slightly older vehicles, so anything up to the 60s feels at home here. As with the other Fat-Alfie circuits we've looked at, this is a really well detailed track featuring something like 600,000 triangles in the mesh alone, with different types of tarmac, with older, grippier stuff, bumpier parts. It's really very highly detailed. And if you have a look at the descriptive page on Race Department, he runs through all of what he's done on here, and there are lots of really pretty features. You have, although it's hard to see, there's this river with mists running alongside the circuit, and it just is pretty epic looking. The circuit is about 10 kilometers long. So again, it's another tough one to get your head around quickly, but it's well worth it, in my opinion. And if you are going for classic cars, it is a must-have in your inventory. I hope you've enjoyed looking through these circuits. Some of them have phenomenal detail. They really are quite a lot of fun to drive. I'm going to try and release the next video in this series pretty soon, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on seeing that. Give this video the thumbs up if you like this content, and leave some comments if you feel like you have some different views that you'd like to get across. Until next time, guys, stay safe. Bye-bye.